Hi everybody, I'm Ron Cantor and you're watching Revive Live. And I just want to say on behalf of the whole team here at Revive Israel and Tikkun Global, Shalom from Jerusalem. We want to know where you're from. We want to know where you're watching from. We know that some of you are in the Philippines and South America, maybe even America. Go ahead and write in the comment section where you're watching from. Go to our website, tikkun.tv, and sign up for our newsletter. It's free. You're going to get articles every week from our senior leaders all over the country that are leading congregations in Haifa, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and the Galilee. These guys are prolific teachers and writers, and we're going to send you their blogs every week free of charge. When you sign up, I will send you my book, Israel and the Coming End Time Awakening, absolutely free of charge. So go ahead to tikkun.tv, sign up, and we will send that out to you this week. Okay, everybody take a deep breath. I'm going to take a sip of water. I'm continuing to teach on my book called Don't Call Me Pastor. Now, why did I come up with that title? Because I'm not a pastor. That's not my gift. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm a teacher, I'm an evangelist, but I'm not a mushy mercy, and I'm not making fun of I am jealous of pastors. Eitan Shishkoff, one of the founders of Tikkun, is one of the most phenomenal fivefold ministry gift pastors that I've ever met. And I am jealous for his gifting, for his mercy and his love for people. But the reason I came up with the title is that because not every senior leader of a congregation is a pastor. Some of them are teachers. Some are evangelists. Some are apostolic. And so we need all those giftings in the body. Now, the book is 13 different lessons on leadership. They're lessons that I learned before or during the 3 years that I led a congregation in Tel Aviv. The problem was, I had never tested out many of those theories until I was the senior leader. And you know what? These biblical principles, they actually worked. And we talk about inner healing, breaking intimidation, how to forgive. I believe covenant, loyal relationships, teams of loyal elders together. We talk about so many things. I believe if you are a leader, and most of you are, maybe not in a congregation, but at home, on your job, everyone leads somewhere. Go ahead and get this book. You can do it at our website, or you can go to Amazon.com and download it. Okay, today I want to talk about overcoming intimidation. I love this teaching. I've been teaching this for probably since the mid-90s, and it's one of my favorite teachings, and it starts in Ukraine. I remember back in the late 90s, we were emissaries in Ukraine. We taught in a Bible college there. We actually birthed a congregation in a wonderful city called Berdichev. Did you know that Fiddler on the Roof, Anatevka is the name of the city, and Fiddler on the Roof was based on Berdichev. And there's now a vibrant, on fire Messianic congregation there. But I remember I was on a train coming back from Odessa to Kiev, and I was with a senior leader, somebody older than me in the Lord. And I was struggling that night. It was an overnight train ride. And I was struggling because that leader hurt me. They wounded me. With their words, with their actions, they abused me, if you will. They didn't realize it. They thought it was fine. But what they did was wrong, and it hurt me. And I accepted it. I did not stand up to it. I did not tell him he was wrong. I submitted to it. And I felt really bad about that. And the reason I did that is because I was intimidated. Have you ever been intimidated? Have you ever been in a situation where you should have said, no, this is not right, but you were scared, you were intimidated? Now, to be clear, there are times when somebody's doing something like that and you just shut up. You don't say anything. As believers, we don't fight for our rights. We have no rights. We've been bought with a price, right? But when you're suffering from intimidation, you need to break that intimidation. And sometimes breaking that intimidation is simply standing up to the intimidator. My daughter Danielle, when we first moved to Israel, she was in her elementary school, 9 years old, and she, for the first 2 weeks, She was a little celebrity. She was from America, and Israelis love Americans. But after a couple of weeks, the girls, the mean girls in the class, began to see that she was becoming popular, and so they had to bring her down. And there was one girl that was very mean to her, and every day she would torment Danielle. And so finally one day, she was in Danielle's face, yelling at her, screaming at her. And Danielle, without even thinking, just reached out, grabbed her necklace, and pulled it off. She didn't even know what she was doing, she told me. And now this girl's necklace is broken, and she's even angrier, and she comes at my daughter. And my daughter, without even thinking, 9 years old, sticks up her foot and boom, kicks her in the stomach. And the girl's on the ground, lost her breath. And I did not teach my daughter to do that. I didn't tell her to go to school and be violent, but I was glad she did that. Why? Because she stood up to a bully. And when she stood up to the bully never bullied her again after that. Now, why was it important for Danielle to do that? Because I don't believe in every instance I have to be like that. To the extent that you know who you are in God, you don't have to do that. I can have somebody be rude to me. Listen, I live in Israel. You can't get a parking spot without somebody being rude to you, and you have to learn to just let it slide. It's a way of life here, people being rude to you. And if you just feel like every time you got to get even, you're going to fight back. No. But to the extent that you know who you are in God, you don't have to respond. But when you are suffering from intimidation, the way you break that is standing up to the intimidator. Again, I'm not preaching violence here. Don't go beat up somebody. But if you're in a situation where somebody under your authority or somebody over you is intimidating you, you have to confront that. I remember when we were living in Ukraine, there was a knock on my door one day. I was in my apartment on Deribasovskaya Street, working out, and I go to answer the door, and it's a babushka, which is a grandmother, and this happened to me every day. They yelled at me all the time. I parked in the wrong place. I used my phone too much, because back then you might have one phone line for 2 or 3 different apartments. So if I'm on the phone, they can't be, and I use the phone line for internet. So I did something wrong. She yelled at, and I just kind of shut the door. And I didn't think much of it. Went back to work out. Another knock at the door. I open up the door. And there's a dude that I know, without a doubt, has killed people in his lifetime. He was Ukrainian mafia, without a doubt, and he's yelling at me. I am not the biggest guy in the world, and even if I was, he's a killer. And he's yelling at me, and he pushes me, and he walks into my apartment. That's why we're teaching on overcoming intimidation. You better believe I was intimidated. And he's yelling at me, and I understood one word, vada, water. And I knew what he was thinking. He was thinking, because, and this was the case every day in Ukraine, is that water would leak from one apartment into the apartment below it. I was the first floor of apartments, and the ground floor below us was his Reebok store, which was great at money laundering. And apparently he thought that I was leaking water into his Reebok store, but I looked that big giant in the eyes, and he was about 6'4". And I looked him in the eye and I said, "Niet, no water coming from here." And I proved it by opening up the door to my bathroom. Except there was 3 inches of water on my floor coming from my washing machine. And he continued to yell at me and intimidate me. And he said, "I'm going to sue you. I'm going to have you thrown out of the country, and I'm going to have you thrown out of your apartment." And I was scared. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? He left. I couldn't think. I didn't know what to do. These are killers. I'm just a missionary in Ukraine. And you can't, sometimes intimidation can be crippling, right? You ever been there? You can't think, you can't eat, you can't do anything. So what did I do? A couple days go by, and he cut off my water, by the way. You can do that if you're on the bottom. He cut off my water. We couldn't wash dishes. We couldn't flush the toilet. We couldn't take showers. And I wanted to go home so bad. I wanted to get on an airplane and go to America and never, ever come back. Remember that congregation I mentioned in Berdichev that is on fire? A couple hundred people doing great. Well, if I had listened to that voice, that never would have happened. I had to overcome intimidation. A couple days go by, no water. I realized I had to do something. And I took an interpreter and I went to the Reebok store. And I went to this guy. First of all, I apologized for slamming the door on the babushka. That was wrong. And then I asked, and again, this guy had a face of stone. I'm going to cut off your water. I'm going to throw you out, and I'm going to sue you. And I didn't know what to do. And then suddenly, I just stayed there, and I wouldn't back down, but I was nice and gentle. There was a change over him, and I don't know what happened, but he turned the water back on, and he never sued me, and I never heard another word about him. But as I was praying that morning and I was walking home, and by the way, Odessa, Ukraine is just so beautiful. Such a beautiful city, the historic area, the old cobblestone streets. Even though at that time Ukraine was just broken, it's much different today. I remember walking home from the Bible school to my apartment on the cobblestone streets, just praying, God, what do I do? And the Lord reminded me that story of Elisha and his servant where he said, there are more with you than against you. That guy is nothing compared to me, Ron. And I had to choose to believe that under any circumstance, God could protect me. And you know what he did? That's the thing, friend. There's nothing really to be afraid of. We don't have to be intimidated. And sometimes just standing up to the bully, standing up to the intimidator, it breaks it right there. Okay, I want to look at Jezebel and I want to look at King Saul. Now, they both represent biblical, demonic intimidators, but they're different. What's different about them? Saul represents somebody over you in authority. Could be a parent, could be a leader. One of the things I hate more than anything else is abusive leaders, pastors and ministry leaders who will yell and scream and lose their temper at their staff. If that is you, stop. That is not God. Who do you think you are? Are you better than the people who work for you? You're not. You are just the same. We are all the dust. It's not about making you famous. It's not about how great your ministry, and they're not there to work to make you successful, but you are there to love them, to shepherd them, to bless them. And if you're such a prima donna that you think that whenever anybody working for you does something wrong, you can lose your temper because you're so special, you know what you need to do is just get out of ministry for a while, because that is not God and you're not in ministry for the right reasons. I have lost my temper exactly one time at somebody that was working for me in the ministry. We were on a ministry trip, and this person said something to my wife that was quite rude, and I snapped and I responded in a very ugly way, and next thing I know, I saw big tears in her eyes, and I felt so horrible. I apologized immediately. An hour later, I got our whole team together, and I said, team, what I said back, even though she was wrong. She was wrong. She should not have spoken that way to my wife. I love my wife. Mwah. But I was wrong because, you see, I'm an authority figure. Listen to me, pastor. Listen to me, leader. You do not understand what it does to somebody under your authority when you yell and scream at them. It's wounding. It's demonic. Do you want to be like Saul? Or do you want to be like Jesus? I want to be like Jesus. We're dealing with a situation now where this guy, he's an evangelist, just regularly screaming, yelling at his people. It's not right. And then there's Jezebel. What's Jezebel? She's somebody under authority who seeks to intimidate people over them, over her in authority. So when I said her, but it really could be male or female. It could be an assistant pastor to a pastor. It could be somebody in the congregation. You know, we've all seen a kid in a grocery store scream and yell until he gets the candy that he wants. That's Jezebel in child form. Do you understand? When it grows up, it can be somebody in your congregation. You know, I remember I was in a congregation where there was somebody that if ever they didn't like what the pastor was saying, they would literally get up and walk out in front of everybody. That has an impact on the pastor, you know, and then the pastor's worried. What do I do? Should I? Well, a godly pastor would not let that intimidate him at all. In fact, he would have a talk with that person, say, that is not acceptable in the congregation. But Jezebel seeks to intimidate leadership. Saul is leadership that seeks to intimidate those under. And then there's Ahab, who accommodates a Jezebel. Ahab, who himself is intimidated. And we're going to get into the story in just a minute of Ahab, Jezebel, and Elijah. But there are some leaders who will openly give up their authority. I have seen pastors who will never go against their wife. They're terrified to go against their wife. I've seen leaders they're terrified of one of their elders. They will give up their place of authority out of intimidation. And we can also see this played out in marriages. Sometimes when people are first married, there's kind of a power struggle in the beginning between a husband and a wife. And sometimes it wins in an ugly way. Sometimes the marriage is broken, but when it is fixed, it's fixed in a deformed way. It's like if you break your arm, but you don't go to a doctor to get it reset, your break will eventually heal, but it will never reach its full potential because it's still out of order. There is order for marriage in the Bible. The Bible speaks about male headship. I know that's not popular today. By the way, it doesn't mean that the man is saying do this, do that, lording it over his wife. Leadership in the Bible is servant leadership, but the Bible gives us the exact order for leadership. And when we don't have that, we have a Jezebelic influence in a marriage or a congregation. I remember when I became a youth pastor, more than 30 years ago, there was our senior pastor at the time. He asked me, he said, Ron, I want you to go to each leader, each elder, and tell them why you want to be youth pastor. Tell them why God's called you to do that. So I went to this one and that one. It was going great. And then I went to the elder who was actually responsible for the youth ministry. And he looked at me and he said, Ron, you know what? It seems like the Holy Spirit is calling you into this ministry. Great. Praise the Lord. Till I saw him a week later. And he said to me, Ron, I was talking with my wife, and we now believe that we should be the youth pastors and you can work underneath us. And I said, can we talk? And we went and we sat down. I said, can I just be honest with you? You just said to me a week ago that the Holy Spirit showed you that I was to be the youth pastor. Then you said you talked to your wife and now you believe that you and her, and he saw what I was saying, and he actually repented and apologized. But that wasn't the end of the subject. I became the youth pastor. They laid hands on me. They set me in. It was great. And about a month later, his wife called me up on the phone, and she said, Ron, we have this great opportunity, a ministry opportunity. We want to do this with the youth. And I said to her, that is a great opportunity, but right now I'm new. I wanted to take this first year and do XYZ. I don't want to do that right now. Maybe in a year we can. No, we have to do it. I said, no, it's a great opportunity. And we went back and forth. And each time she got stronger and stronger and stronger because she was used to intimidating youth pastors. And I wasn't going to be intimidated. And so she finally got so mad at me, she said, well, you are going to talk to my husband. And she hung up on me. And I went to her husband. I did talk to her, and I said, this isn't right. And again, he repented. Why? Because he was kind of an Ahab. She was a Jezebelic figure. I was an Elijah figure. He was in the middle as an Ahab. Eventually, in the same couple, by the way, they used to argue before the elders board that the elders could never make a decision unless every elder agreed. It had to be unanimous. And that sounds godly and bold. We're going to keep praying until we're all unanimous. No, because to not make a decision is to make a decision. And so what she could do is tell her husband how to vote on any given topic. And that way you had one woman who wasn't even an elder controlling the entire elders board. Well, because they couldn't have control, they eventually left the congregation. But do you see how intimidation works? And often what will happen is that when a Jezebelic person, and again, I want to be clear, it can be male, it can be female, when they keep going up against a brick wall and they're not able to control, they'll disappear. Sometimes they'll submit to authority. Sometimes they will come and they will thank you for showing them their sin. It can be a place, a time of great freedom and victory for them. But let's go ahead and look at Ahab and Jezebel. We have this story in 1 Kings chapter 18 where Elijah you can't find him. And then he appears to Obadiah and he says, go get Ahab. And Ahab comes and they have this little confrontation. And because Ahab is Ahab, he's easily intimidated, he just listens to Elijah, who says, go get me all the false prophets of Baal and Ashtoreth, and we're going to meet and we're going to have a showdown. And so they do that. You know the story. They cannot get their gods to do anything. They're doing curses and cutting themselves and chants and incantations. Nothing is working. Their gods cannot answer by fire. But then Elijah, he says, bring me water a bunch of times. And they fill up the moat around the offering with water, put water on the offering. Why? Because it's hard for it to burn. By the way, it hasn't rained in 3.5 years, and Elijah's wasting a lot of water, but he's the man of God. And then he calls down for fire from heaven. Shoom! Fire comes down from heaven, consumes us. The people, there's revival. The Lord is God. We will follow him. It was a glorious moment for Israel. And I want to tell you what happened. It rains right after that, and Ahab goes home. This is chapter 19. And he tells Jezebel everything that Elijah had done. How he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah. And she said, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely. I always liked that. They were so eloquent in the Old Testament. They loved their rhetoric. May the gods deal with me. I can't even say it right. May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I by this time tomorrow do not make your life like one of them. By the way, the Middle East, which is where that happened, we are kings and queens of rhetoric. Do you remember Saddam Hussein talked about the mother of all wars? That's kind of what we do here. We thrive on emotion and intimidation. The same spirit from back then lives here today. You can see it in ISIS. You can see it all over the Middle East, where with words, people seek to use Jezebel to intimidate. So she's going to kill him. And you know what happens next? Elijah, the man of God, he gets on his horse. And he brum, 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 and he's going to go into Jezreel. And he goes right into Jezreel, and he puts his hand on her skinny neck, and he takes her out. No, he did not do that. He didn't do that. He should have done it, but he didn't do that. Now, I'm going to tell you what he did in our next broadcast, because we're running out of time. I want to continue on this teaching about Jezebel, about Saul, about intimidation in our next broadcast. I hope you're enjoying this. If you are, get the book, Don't Call Me Pastor. Use the link below. We love you. We bless you. I want to thank you for being with us today here at Revive Live. Go to the link below and get our newsletter. You can also share. You can also like this broadcast. That helps us to reach a lot more people. And that's what we're doing here. We want to, from Jerusalem, see the word of the Lord go forth from Zion to the ends of the world. Ad ketzot haaretz in Hebrew. We love you. We bless you. Shalom from all of us here. Revive Israel, Tikkun International. Mwah! We bless you. Shalom.